Hello and welcome to the G3 Pulse podcast, where today we'll be discussing the USI gaming scene and the growth of crash-style games. Joining me to do so is Silverback Gaming's SVP and co-founder, Raph Di Guisto. Raph, thank you very much for coming on.
Hi, William. Thank you very much for having me.
So, beginning with the US, new and proprietary content has been a focal point to help differentiate online brands. How is Silverback Gaming approaching this increasingly lucrative market?
So we approach the US market by focusing on the development of high quality, innovative and engaging games. We understand that new and proprietary content is a key differentiator for online gaming brands, and we're committed to delivering a consistent flow of such content. Our approach includes a lot of market research to identify the player preferences and trends, whether it's on the theme side or on the feature side. And we also collaborate with talented game designers, and obviously we invest in cutting-edge game technology to create a unique gaming experience that resonates with the US audience.
And how is Silverback's relationship with GAN influencing your success in the market so far?
Yeah, I mean, you could call it a relationship, but they own us. Silverback is a GAN studio, so yeah. But it's been a crucial component of our success story in the US market, definitely. GAN provides us with a robust platform. Their Super RGS is the name of the platform, the aggregator. A platform for distributing our games and accessing, a wide network of online operators. The partnership has allowed us to reach a broader audience and to deliver our content more effectively. Essentially leveraging some of the tools that GAN had already built, and thereby enhancing our visibility and success in the US market. Yeah.
And do you find that US operators are seeking exclusivity on titles? And further to that, what are the advantages of producing exclusive content for kind of ascertaining customer data, for instance?
So yes, US operators often seek exclusivity on game titles as a mean of differentiating themselves in a very competitive market. So for us, producing exclusive content can be advantageous for gathering, customer data, because it allows the operators to offer unique experiences that attract and retain players, if that makes sense. So with exclusive content, operators can gain insights into player preferences, behavior, and performance, which can inform marketing and game development strategies for us as well. So it's definitely something that we're seeing and something that we're actively participating in. Yeah.
Do you think that operators moving more content in-house presents a risk to content providers?
Yeah, I mean, operators moving content in-house can pose a potential risk, for suppliers. While in-house content, can save on costs, for operators, they don't have to pay the fees or the royalties that they would pay to other suppliers normally. It also, it's not just the risk, because at the same time we believe that at the end of the day, the players are going to choose what they want to play, and for not offering, what other operators might be offering or something, will actually penalize an operator. So yes, having exclusive content from in-house studios, and we see some of the big operators have 3 different studios. I'm not going to name everybody, but some operators have a lot of studios and a lot of content in-house. For us, we try to fill that gap, by providing a diverse range of high quality games and allowing operators to focus on their core competencies, and allowing us to provide the games. If that makes sense.
Would you say that cost savings by not paying third-party content providers for games is countered by the need to supply a large variety of games?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, what we see is that gameplay tends to be, very concentrated on a very small number of games. So for me, it's not really the large number of games that is required. It's more in terms of having the content that the players want, and that might be, limited to 2-3 suppliers or something. But not, avoiding these suppliers, obviously, you're going to cut some costs, but also your players might end up going somewhere else. So I think there's a balance to be struck there.
And what type of content are US players looking for?
So in terms of US content, we find the US market is still very influenced by the land-based content. If that makes sense.
Yep.
So there is still that strong correlation. Games that perform well on land-based casinos perform well online. It's not quite as disconnected as it is in Europe, where the online world has taken a life of its own. We tailor our game to cater to the preferences of and nuances of the US audience without having that land-based advantage. So, we incorporate themes, visuals, gameplay element that resonate with American players, whether it be, we know that, American players like a decision point in the game where they can, impact the outcome, whether it's a choice in terms of, left or right or a gamble or something like this. Additionally, we also collaborate with local partners to ensure, that our games meet the expectation of good bettors, to understand what they really want.
Do you feel like those other suppliers within the industry, I don't know, the likes of perhaps R. Franco, Zetro, I know, no, they're not particularly US, but R. Franco, Zetro, Novamatic, all these big companies that have a big land-based operation, would you say that they have an advantage insofar as they have that backlog of titles that they can then translate to the online side? Or would you say that online-only suppliers have their own advantage in being specialized within their field?
Yes, I think, if you look at the UK market 10 years ago, basically, where you still had Rainbow Riches and Cleopatra were the dominating games in the UK. We've really shifted away from that, and obviously Rainbow Riches was it was a pub game, I believe, and Cleopatra was also very much from the land-based industry. So we're seeing that in the US, whether it's, I'm not going to name any names, but you come up with a few studios. And definitely, we think that's an advantage. And not having that ability to start, to have the land-based titles is definitely something where we're coming a bit behind. But as we see the market mature, we're confident that, the online space is going to have a life of its own. And that, as we're seeing like things like, I'm going to say like Mega Ways, for example, was a huge hit in the US as well, just as it was in Europe. And it doesn't come from land-based, obviously. So we see that kind of dynamic, but we seeing it change as well going forward in the sense that, as the online player matures in the US, we kind of hope that kind of link between the land-based and the online will kind of, like it did in the UK, like it did in Europe, kind of disappear at some point. Yeah.
You touched on it previously, but on that localization point for US players, localization for the US, in your eyes, means offering a decision. So offering a gamble feature, bet your remaining 12p and you might win a £1 bet kind of thing. Or is there something more on the localization piece, localizing to sports teams and different jurisdictions? Or do you just see the US as, predominantly one type of player?
No, I wouldn't say the US is predominantly one type of player. I do think the US players have their own preferences, and having a decision point, a choice point in the game is one of them. It's not the only one, but we know that whether it's as I said, like gamble for more free spins or some sort of decision between two choices, is something that we definitely look at. In terms of themes, the US player has their own themes. We've seen the Buffalo games have been really popular there. But again, from the land-based industry. And obviously certain games that, might have been very popular in Ireland, for example, might not play that well in the US. In terms of sports is a funny one because, I have yet to see a hugely popular sports slot game. Obviously there are a lot of cross-sell opportunities in terms of, when sports event, sports gamblers being, cross-sold over to casino and that kind of stuff. But what we found is that actually, trying to bet on that sports element in terms of themes anyway, can be very tricky. It's not something that we're shying away from because we are doing some sports themed games and we know that other studios do the same. But it is not necessarily a very popular theme, if that makes sense, in the long term anyway. Well, during events potentially, but long term not so much.
Moving on to crash titles, not necessarily US only, but on a global scale, what would you say is driving the growth of non-traditional casino content, namely crash games?
Yeah, so crash games have been very interesting from the start. I think they come from crypto, bustabit.com or whatever it was that started it. And what we found is that they attract a completely different demographic than traditional casino type slot games. Namely, we're talking about millennials, Gen Z, like the younger generations, but also younger female audience, which might not be the predominant kind of target demographic generally when you're trying to find casino players, and that comes from first of all, the graphics were super ugly when they started. It wasn't at all about something shiny and pretty. There was that interactive social aspect of it. I don't know if you remember, but some of them, it's that chat box, right? The Bustabit chat box where everybody's commenting. And it's that togetherness as well, that aspect of like, we're all playing this together, we're sharing an experience, and we can talk to each other about our experience in this crash game. So in that respect, I think it's completely, different to what traditional slot games might be. And in terms of who it attracts and who plays crash games, I think it's a completely, separate demographic that wasn't necessarily attracted to casino games at all before, but that somehow has jumped on the bandwagon on this one. So yeah, I think they're a great example of innovation within the industry, and we can see how whether it's Beyond Play or other kind of like together playing together studios that are coming up with ideas of how we can play casino games as a group and communicate with each other and make it fun as an audience, whether it's online, recreate that kind of like around the machine experience that you might have in a casino with your friends. I can see that influencing the casino space as well, that kind of social gambling aspect of it, yeah.
I mean, it's how it combines elements of gaming and gambling. As you said, that social functionality combined with what you were saying before about the US player and wanting a decision to make. So I guess how from this point, graphics, of course, are going to get better with it coming somewhat from the kind of crypto arena. I think that the graphics are obviously going to get better, but is there any other ways in which you can see crash games improving?
Yeah, I mean, we, as you said, there's that cash out element where you decide you've got the, so it's bound to be popular in terms of like the have a lot of control or feeling of control over the game. We're experimenting with different ideas. We like one of our crash games has like some pauses. So for example, when the game reaches like 2x, it'll pause for 5 seconds. You're like, do you want this? Do you want to take the 2x right now? You've got 5 seconds, and it kind of flashes before it starts incrementing again. And it'll pause at 2x, 5x, 10x, and that kind of like, it's like take it or leave it kind of, deal or no deal kind of aspect to it. That it's not going to crash for the next 5 seconds, but it's also not increasing. So small things like this, we believe there can be non-graphical elements that we can add to the game as well. We've talked about potentially making a VR crash game. I don't know if that's a good idea. VR is a different topic altogether in terms of like how to create that aspect of togetherness in a 3D sense. Being in a room with other people. Definitely, in terms of themes, as we saw, the crash game started off very ugly and very like, almost black and white, with very little design onto it. Now we're starting to see rockets and things and making it look a bit better. But I think we've still got a long way to go because we're still very early days. And I think I saw, if you think about it, the crash game in itself is just, it's a very simple gamble, like with a where you can multiply an existing bet. So I think we've started to see like sports betting incorporating crash games. So for example, if you win your bet, you can then multiply it using a crash game on that. So, crisscrossing crash games with sports gambling potentially is also a big avenue that we may want to explore at some point, yeah.
And the simplicity and light graphics of crash games create the impression that they're quite easy to develop. But speaking to a few different crash game developers, doesn't feel like it's the case. How do you find it? Do you find that the unique RNG engines, unconventional features, how do they impact the design process?
So from a design perspective, the gameplay experience is quite simple. From a technology perspective, it is completely different to how you may create a slot game or something. In a slot game, you generate the output, and then it's sent to the front end, and the front end displays it, and that's it. With a crash game, there's a constant communication between the server and the client, in the sense that if you knew beforehand at what point it's going to crash, you could cash out exactly at the right point. So it's a question of the server continually communicating with the client. It hasn't crashed yet. Boom, now it's crashed, kind of thing. So from a design perspective, we're using streams, we're using different technology. So just creating one crash game requires a completely different kind of infrastructure and just a design. So it's a very different type of game. I think if we're talking about design, it's important to differentiate between graphical design and kind of architectural design. Graphically, it's not very complicated to do. Obviously, you make a little rocket kind of thing, but from an architecture perspective, it's a bit more involved. Yeah.
And out of those technologies that you reference, how are you utilizing AI? Obviously, AI has been around for a long time, and it is being spoken about at the moment as if it's a new thing. It isn't, but it's increasingly sophisticated and it's being increasingly used. So I don't know how much you can go into this, but how is Silverback Gaming utilizing AI in it to influence game performance and the customer experience?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the tools that have come on the market in the last year or so are quite new. So while it's nothing completely different that's come out, we do use AI at a concept level, to try out concepts, to see, okay, what would it look if we built a game like this? Can we have an idea? Could we create a theme with this idea, whether it be like these type of fruits, these type of things, and try an idea. And this way we can create a lot of different concepts. And then once we've got a theme or an idea that we really like, then we can polish it and get our designers to go full throttle on it. So from our perspective, it's been a great tool that we can use to explore ideas during the game creation process. And I know, a lot of people are talking about, obviously there's AI being used as recommendation engines or being used to identify a certain type of player. We've done stuff like this in the past. There are some difficulties in there, namely, if you remember the Netflix prize, when Netflix were building their recommendation engine, we tried to build something like that for casino games, but the problem is you've got 2-3 games that are taking all the gameplay. So if we're comparing that to Netflix, it's like if everybody was watching the same 2-3 movies over and over and over again. So what are you going to recommend to these people? How creative can you make an AI recommendation engine? That's a very tricky question. And what we find is actually for these type of problems, other tools are actually better. Not necessarily AI, more like generic or suggesting new games or similar theme type of games rather than just something a lot more data driven. And in terms of, identifying players, it's also a slippery slope because, and I've said this before, but if you think about it, if you try to find, like, for example, finding out a VIP, where are my VIP customers? The AI algorithm is not necessarily going to be able to differentiate between the VIP customer and the problem gambler. And so then you've got a real problem. Like if you let the AI loose like this and try and start making decisions based on that, you're going to have some problems. So this is where having some additional layers of, you can use these tools, but it's very problematic automating things on top of it, if that makes sense. So I think, generally, we use AI in the game creation process. And there are lots of other spaces in the industry where, AI is being used. But I think it's a case by case kind of thing where we have to be careful how we introduce these technologies in gambling.
And finally, on a more of a company basis, it's been a couple of years since Silverback, I believe, was acquired by GAN. How have those couple of years been compared to before? Because you were a co-founder of Silverback, and also what's the future for the company going forwards?
Yeah, so before the acquisition, we were a very small team, and I was involved in a lot of things, they say, like, as a founder, you do everything yourself, whether it's setting up a coffee machine or setting up a desk or anything. So you end up doing a lot of things that you may not be doing otherwise. But now we've got a much bigger team, and things are much better organized. I'm not doing everything myself. a lot of other people involved. I think it'd be a bit ridiculous to even try at this point. And yeah, I think we've benefited from the financial firepower that GAN has provided us in terms of hiring a bigger team, hiring very very good talent in Bulgaria and Sofia, whether it be our designers, our sound designers, our developers, project managers. We've got some really really talented people which we may not have been able to afford prior to the acquisition. And yes, generally, our distribution also has changed in the sense that before we were distributing strictly with, the Relax Silver Bullet platform program, which was great, but didn't really offer us access to the US. So now, we're in the US, we're releasing games to big operators on the US side. And so that would be the main difference between before and after, I guess. The bigger team, bigger things, more games, I guess. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Raf, thank you very much for coming on. Really enjoyed our chat. Particularly found the discussion about AI right at the end there particularly interesting. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much for having me, William. All the best.
I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you want to watch more, why not subscribe to our channel somewhere here.